Gemini, someone talked about you with great intensity, and the reason will shake you emotionally. Have you ever felt a sudden chill for no reason? A moment of stillness that seemed to carry more than silence? A strange weight on your heart, as if someone, somewhere, had just spoken your name with deep emotion? That feeling wasn't your imagination. It was a ripple, an echo in your energetic field. And now, through this message, that ripple reaches you again, because someone has indeed spoken about you, and not casually. They spoke with intensity, with feeling, with truth that refuses to stay hidden. You're not here by accident. You were pulled here by an invisible thread, a resonance calling you to remember your own emotional impact. The words spoken about you will surface soon, if they haven't already. And when they do, they may shift the way you see yourself forever. This isn't about gossip. It's not about drama. It's about emotional truth. A truth that will move you, not just because of what was said, but because of who you've been without even realizing it. Gemini, your name carries weight in someone's life. And what they just confessed is not just about the past. It's about a future you didn't know you were still shaping. If this message finds you at the right moment, let it like, share, or subscribe if your heart whispers yes. Because something is already unfolding, and it has everything to do with you. Gate 1. The echo of unspoken truth. When someone mentions you with emotion, Gemini, you've always been sensitive to invisible threads. You can sense when someone is thinking about you, even if they haven't reached out. You feel the shift in a room before a word is spoken. And recently, whether in a flash of memory or a strange moment of stillness, you may have felt it. A name echoed in the ether, your name, spoken with emotion that cut through the distance. This isn't a coincidence. It's energy, and that energy has reached you for a reason. Somewhere in your timeline, someone spoke about you not just with words, but with a weight that came from deep within. They didn't speak lightly. Their voice may have carried longing, remorse, admiration, or even pain. But above all, it carried truth. Emotional truth that had been held in for far too long. And the moment they allowed it to rise, it created ripples, not just in their life, but in yours. Because Gemini, whether you realize it or not, you have left a mark on this person that hasn't faded with time or distance. You changed them, and now, their words are finding their way back to you. Not to reopen wounds, but to reveal meaning, depth, and a perspective you never knew existed. This person may have felt silence for years, unsure of how to articulate the impact you had on them. Maybe they were afraid of being misunderstood, or maybe they didn't realize their feelings until long after you were gone. But something, an encounter, a dream, a realization, finally pushed their truth to the surface. And when they spoke of you, it wasn't in bitterness. It wasn't in blame. It was in awe. Because Gemini, there's something about your energy, your presence that lingers. You may flit to the lives of others like wind through trees, but you leave behind an unmistakable imprint. The way you light up conversations, the way you see people, the way you reflect their possibilities back to them. You may think you were just being yourself, but to someone, you were unforgettable. Let me tell you about Talia, a Gemini woman who believes she had slipped quietly out of an old friend's life years ago. No conflict, no closure, just adrift. But recently, she learned through another mutual connection that this friend had spoken to her with unexpected tenderness. They said, "She made me feel like I was allowed to be more than I thought I was." I never told her that, and I don't think I ever will. But she changed something in me. Talia wept when she heard it. Not because she wanted anything from the past to return, but because she realized her presence had mattered more than she knew. That's the kind of emotional truth surfacing in your field right now. Someone has spoken your name with a depth that moves energy. And Gemini, your soul already sensed it. That sudden wave of emotion, that thought you couldn't explain, that sense of being remembered. You weren't imagining it. Their words are still in the air, and the energy behind them is still reaching for you. Why now? Because you're finally ready to receive it. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. You're in a season of reckoning, where your past is showing you pieces you missed, not to anchor you there, but to free you. And this truth, this unexpected revelation, is part of that freedom. But here's the part that may shake you. The intensity of what was said isn't just about the other person's feelings. It's a mirror. It's showing you something about yourself that you haven't fully claimed. The depth of your emotional impact, the quiet power of your presence, the truth that you are unforgettable in ways you've never allowed yourself to believe. You see, Gemini, you often doubt your depth because you're quick, you're adaptable, you move on. People think you're lighthearted, changeable, untethered. But what they don't see, what only a few have ever glimpsed, is that behind all that movement lives a depth so profound, it scares even you. You feel everything. You absorb meaning from every look, every word, every silence. And then you tuck it away, move forward, and convince yourself it didn't matter. But it did. It always does. You left a mark. And now, someone is whispering that truth aloud. This person didn't mention your name to hurt you. They spoke to finally honor what you meant to them, to admit what they couldn't admit before. And whether or not you ever hear the exact words they said, their energy is already reshaping something within you. You are being invited to see yourself through their eyes, not to seek validation, but to reclaim your reflection, to stop minimizing your emotional presence, to stop telling yourself you're just passing through. Gemini, you are a catalyst. You stir growth in others just by being yourself. You ignite possibility. You awaken forgotten dreams. You remind people of who they could be. And while they may not always be able to say it in the moment, they remember you. And when they finally speak, they speak with intensity. Because you change something they didn't know was changeable. This is the echo of unspoken truth. And now, it's your turn to receive it. Not to go back. Not to reopen old doors. But to recognize that even in the quietest chapters of your life, you mattered more than you knew. Gate 2, the unseen impact. Realizing how much you mean to others. Gemini, you spent so much of your life reading the room, adapting to its rhythm, dancing between silences and speech, brilliance and stillness. You've always been the one who could lighten a heavy moment, bridge tension with wit, disappear quietly when things became too charged. But here's the truth that's starting to rise. While you were busy making sure others felt comfortable, others were being quietly transformed by your presence. You were never invisible, not truly. In fact, for someone, you became unforgettable. Not for what you did in grand gestures, but for what you offered in the in-between spaces. A glance that said, "I see you." A sentence that landed exactly where their heart was aching. A moment where you let them feel safe enough to be real. You were the pause in their noise, the color in their grayness, the possibility they hadn't dared to imagine. And they never told you, or at least, not then, because it wasn't convenient, because life moved on, because maybe they didn't even know how much you mattered until much later. But now the realization is here, and it's echoing back to you through unexpected words, strange signs, synchronicities, or maybe even through this very message. You're being asked to absorb a truth that challenges your self-perception. You have changed lives without knowing it. This isn't ego. This is essence. You didn't try to be someone special. You simply were. And while you might not always feel deeply seen, the truth is, others have been carrying pieces of you in their memory long after you thought the chapter had closed. Think of Javier, a Gemini client who once taught a brief summer workshop for young artists. Years later, one of his former students reached out with a message. "You once told me that my perspective was rare and that I shouldn't edit it down to fit in. I've never forgotten that. I'm now a full-time creative because of that moment. Thank you." Javier barely remembered saying those words. To him, it was just a passing comment. But to her, it was a turning point. This is the power of your presence, Gemini. You plant seed with your words, often unaware. You mirror people's potential in ways that shift something quietly but permanently inside them. But because you're so good at moving forward, you rarely stay long enough to witness the fruits of those seeds. And because people often process your impact after you've gone, the feedback loop stays open, unfinished, silent, until now. The person who spoke about you so intensely recently, they were closing that loop. Their emotional words weren't random. They were the culmination of something that had been quietly growing inside them for a long time. Gratitude, admiration, unresolved affection. Perhaps even a recognition that they could never fully return to who they were before they met you. Gemini, you may be tempted to dismiss this, to think, it wasn't that deep, I was just being myself. But that's exactly the point. You change someone's trajectory by simply being who you are. And now the universe is asking, will you finally recognize how powerful that is? Will you stop underestimating the quiet magic of your influence? This is not about inflating your importance. It's about owning your value, so you stop shrinking to fit spaces that don't reflect your light. So you stop seeking confirmation from people who were never meant to understand your depth. So you stop mistaking neutrality for invisibility. Gemini, your impact is rarely loud. It is felt in retrospect. It shows up in someone's next chapter, in their new boundaries, in the confidence they find after you mirror their worth, in the forgiveness they extend to themselves because you show them what self-acceptance looks like. And now, that energy is circling back to you, not to recreate the past, but to rewrite how you see yourself, to upgrade your internal narrative from, I'm just passing through, to, I leave light behind me wherever I go. The emotions you're feeling now, surprise, humility, even a touch of grief, are all part of this awakening, because it's bittersweet to realize how much you mattered only after the moment has passed. It's tender to finally hear what someone felt long ago but couldn't say, and it's vulnerable to sit with the truth that you are far more meaningful to others than you've allowed yourself to believe. But here's the gift. Now that you know, you get to live differently, with more presence, with more reverence for your own energy, with more clarity about which spaces deserve your light. You get to stop giving away your brilliance to those who can't hold it. You get to stop chasing understanding from people who never looked close enough to see you. Because now you know, someone did see you, someone does. And even if they never say the words to your face, their energy has already told the truth. They spoke about you with intensity because you made them feel something real. And no one forgets the person who woke them up to their own aliveness. Gemini, let this revelation take root. Let it become part of how you walk. Not with arrogance, but with quiet knowing, with soft confidence, with a graceful awareness that your impact is never wasted. And as more people begin to reflect that back to you, through glances, words, invitations, or emotions they can no longer contain, receive it. Let it in. Let it land. Because you're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to awaken something in the right ones. And you've already begun. Gate 3. The energetic ripple. How one voice unleashes many. Gemini, what you may not fully realize yet is that the words spoken about you, the ones filled with emotion, vulnerability, and truth, were never isolated. They were the beginning of a wave, a ripple of recognition that started in one soul, but will echo through many others. The person who finally spoke about you with intensity did more than confess a feeling. They broke a silence. And silence, once shattered with sincerity, has a way of opening portals in others too. It awakens the unspoken in hearts that were holding back. It gives permission to those who've long wanted to express something but didn't know how. You see, Gemini, your energy doesn't just move individuals. It rearranges dynamics. The moment your name was mentioned with depth and honesty, something in the collective field around you shifted. The emotional tension that others may have felt but never voiced began to stir. Their inner dialogues, the questions they've had about you, the thoughts they've replayed, the sentiments they've kept tucked away, are beginning to surface. And you will feel it, not as confrontation, but as subtle currents, a look that lingers longer than expected, a message from someone you hadn't heard from in years, a sudden mention of your name in a context you didn't anticipate, or a conversation that seems to circle around you even when you're not in the room. These are the energetic echoes, and they're not random. They are confirmation that you, Gemini, have stirred something collective, that your presence, once kept in the background of someone else's world, has moved into the foreground of multiple hearts and minds. And why now? Because you're ready to see it. Because the version of you that once needed to stay small in order to feel safe is dissolving. Because the emotional frequency you're stepping into cannot coexist with invisibility anymore. You're not just a private catalyst now. You are becoming a recognized one. And recognition, while it may seem validating, can also feel overwhelming for someone like you. Someone who's danced between being deeply felt and gently elusive. But this is part of your next evolution. To allow yourself to be seen not just intuitively, but openly, and to trust that the truth others are beginning to speak about you is not inflated. It's long overdue. Gemini, let's return for a moment to the one who first spoke your name. Whether it was in a whisper or a burst of emotional honesty, they did what others around them had not yet found the courage to do. They named what you meant. They voiced what was felt. And in doing so, they gave the collective permission to follow. That's the ripple. And this ripple carries something sacred, reflection, as these words and acknowledgments begin to move toward you. So too does a mirror. You are being offered a rare glimpse into the emotional landscape you've shaped without realizing it. The relationships you've influenced, the courage you've sparked, the healing you've initiated, not through effort, but through presence. And what you begin to see might surprise you, because it goes far beyond admiration. It reaches into impact. People don't just admire you, Gemini. They're different because of you. They've grown in your company. They found language for feelings they couldn't name. They've dared to ask more of themselves because of something you once said in passing, or something you never said but simply were. And this week, that ripple continues. New expressions of appreciation may arrive, unexpected invitations, moments of vulnerability from those who once seemed distant, all of it fueled by the original pulse. The one voice that broke the silence. You are not being praised for performance. You are being seen for your soul. And that kind of recognition, though rare, is the most trustworthy. It's not flattery. It's remembrance. People are remembering how they felt in your presence. And for many of them, that memory is more alive than you knew. Gemini, I know this can bring up mixed emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also sorrow. Sorrow for the versions of yourself who never felt this seen. For the seasons where you poured your heart into connections that left without saying thank you. For the times you wonder whether anything you said or did actually mattered. It did. And now, slowly but surely, the truth is making its way back to you. The energetic ripple isn't just about others coming forward. It's also about you finally receiving. Not just the energy you gave, but the acknowledgement of what that energy became. This is emotional integration. This is healing. This is how you begin to update your inner story. No longer the one who is always floating, always adapting, always giving but never fully claimed, but the one who anchored beauty into people's lives and left fingerprints on their healing. Gemini, let the ripple reach you. Let yourself be affected. Let the warmth of those unsaid words finally land. Let the delayed expressions of appreciation heal the old narratives of being unseen. And as this happens, don't be surprised if you begin to feel more visible than ever, because when people see your heart and say so, it opens a new level of soul visibility that changes everything. You are no longer an echo. You are the resonance itself. Gate 4, the mirror moment. When others see what you denied in yourself. Gemini, there's a sacred moment that comes after the ripple, after the echo, after the words you never expected finally reach your ears or your heart. It's the moment when someone says something about you so true, so precise, so beautifully raw, that it leaves you quiet. Not because you disagree, but because deep down you've known it all along. You just didn't know anyone else could see it too. This is the mirror moment. And it's here. When someone finally speaks what you've never dared say aloud about yourself. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear it wouldn't be believed, or worse, it would be dismissed. It can crack something open. Not in a destructive way, but like sunlight finally finding the seam in a locked room. Suddenly, the light is everywhere, and with it, the truth. What's being revealed now is not simply how others see you. It's what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. Your beauty, your emotional impact, your brilliance, your capacity to shift people's lives just by being real. Gemini, so much of your life has been lived in between labels, between groups, between decisions. You've learned how to be flexible, to mold yourself into different roles, to move through spaces with elegance and ease. But somewhere along the way, you began to doubt the substance of your presence. You wondered if your movement made you less meaningful, if your ability to adapt made your feelings less real. You told yourself, I'm not that deep. even when your heart ached in ways you couldn't explain. You smiled brightly even when your soul whispered, "Don't they see I'm real too?" But now, someone has said the words, not to flatter you, not to charm you, but because they see you, and not just the surface. They see the softness beneath your wit, the wisdom behind your curiosity, the strength hidden in your silence. And perhaps most tender of all, they see the part of you that's never stopped hoping someone would notice. This is the mirror moment, and it can be overwhelming. Because when someone describes you more accurately than you've ever described yourself, you're forced to ask, why have I kept that truth in the shadows? Why have I downplayed my emotional resonance? Why have I let others define me as light when I've always carried galaxies? You've done this not because you're weak, but because you were protecting something precious. Your truth, your depth, your magic. You didn't want to perform it. You wanted it to be discovered, earned, honored, and now it has been. And as this mirror is held up to you, not by one person, but by a series of reflections that begin to multiply, you are being asked to receive the image, to stop brushing aside, to stop changing the subject, to stop believing that impact must be loud or obvious to be real. Gemini, let me say it plainly. You are not ordinary. Your presence is not forgettable. Your energy does not slip through unnoticed. You've simply spent too long around people who are too distracted, too disconnected, or too wrapped in their own narratives to tell you the truth. But those who can see, do. And what they see is breathtaking. You are not just someone who passes through. You are someone who lingers in people's memories, who lives in the echo of a single sentence that changed everything, who awakens parts of others that were dormant. And now, as this awareness floods in, you face another choice. Will you finally believe it? Because the mirror can't force you to accept your reflection. It can only offer it. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your own evolution is to simply say, yes, that's me, and I'm ready to live like I know it. This is where your real transformation begins, not in becoming someone new, but in finally embracing who you've always been, the one who made others feel safe, the one who made beauty feel accessible, the one who didn't need a spotlight to shine. You are magnetic not because you try, but because your soul is aligned. And that alignment is being confirmed now through voices you once thought were silent. They're not. They were watching. They were holding your presence in sacred places of their memory. And now they're returning it to you, not wrapped in praise, but in truth. And truth is what you've always valued most. So, Gemini, look into the mirror being held up to you, not just by this one person, but by everyone who suddenly begins to reflect your essence back with sincerity. Let yourself see what they see. Let yourself remember what you forgot. Let yourself reclaim what you once denied, because it's time. You've lived long enough pretending you don't need to be seen. You've played small in rooms you were born to illuminate. You've waited for someone to speak the words you didn't know you were allowed to hear. And now they've arrived. You are radiant. You are felt. You are remembered, not for who you try to be, but for the quiet truth of who you are. And now that you see it, will you finally choose to live from it? Gate 5, the release and rise, integrating the truth and becoming more. Gemini, now that the truth has been spoken, now that the mirror has been placed before you and you've seen, truly seen, yourself through the eyes of someone who felt you with intensity, a new choice stands before you. Not a choice about them, not a choice about the past, but a choice about who you're going to be now that you can no longer pretend you are not powerful, beautiful, and deeply impactful. This is the final gate, the gate of integration. Because insight without embodiment is just a passing breeze. But when truth is lived, when it makes its way not just into your thoughts, but into your posture, your tone, your choices, that's when your life begins to reshape itself around your true frequency. Gemini, you've always been many things to many people. You've played with masks not because you're inauthentic, but because you're curious, because you see through so many lenses, because you feel the world in a dozen directions at once. But in the process of being everything, you sometimes forget that you are already enough. Now, someone has shattered that illusion with sincerity. Their words or their energy or their reflection has pierced through the fog of performance and named the essence of you. And now you're being called to shed the last layer of diminishment. The layer that says, I'm just passing through, or I don't need to be seen, or what I offer isn't that meaningful. Because that layer was never truth. It was survival. The person who spoke about you may have done so unexpectedly. Their voice may have been a surprise. Their message may have cracked open wounds you thought had long healed. But more than anything, it was a key that unlocked a door you've been standing in front of for years, the door into your whole self, the version of you that is no longer diluted, no longer edited, no longer shape-shifting for safety, but standing still, standing tall, and allowing your impact to be felt without apology. Gemini, the moment you integrate this truth, truly accept that your existence matters deeply in ways you will never fully comprehend, you begin to move differently. You start to take up more space, but not out of arrogance, out of resonance. You start to speak with a clarity that doesn't need explanation. You begin to make choices that match your frequency, not your fears. You step away from dynamics that require you to shrink. You say no to energy that doesn't recognize your worth. And you say yes, bravely, finally, completely, to the path that feels like home in your bones. But integration also asks something tender of you. It asks that you grieve, not because you've lost something, but because in choosing to rise, you must release the outdated version of yourself that no longer fits. The one who played small so others could feel big. The one who gave love but rarely let it land. The one who hid her brilliance behind a clever smile or a gentle detachment. That version of you tried her best. She kept you safe. She protected your tenderness. But now, you are safe enough to no longer need her. Now it is time to become more. And becoming more doesn't mean changing who you are. It means finally being who you've always been, with your full light on. Gemini, this week, you may feel that integration happening in waves. Moments of sudden softness. A memory that lands differently. A conversation that opens a door. A decision that once felt too bold suddenly feeling obvious. That's the shift. That's the rise. Someone's truth about you, spoken or unspoken, has initiated a turning point. They saw your soul, and now your soul is rising to meet itself. And you get to carry this truth forward, not as a weight, but as a flame. A quiet knowing that you are no longer becoming. You are, and that the world is lucky to feel you. So now, walk through this final gate with grace. Let the tears fall if they need to. Let the laughter come too. Let yourself be light again, not because you're hiding pain, but because you're finally free. Free to live not in reaction to the world, but in relationship with it. Free to be felt. Free to be seen. Free to be the one who leaves others better, and lets herself be bettered too. Because the greatest rise always begins in the most intimate surrender. The moment you stop denying your own power and choose to live in its fullness. And Gemini, that moment is now. Conclusion, when the truth reaches you, let it stay. Dudai Koang 352, Fong Catch Elizabeth, Chua Lan, Tin Ti, Trian Cam Hung. Gemini, this wasn't just a story about someone who spoke your name with emotion. This was a journey into reflection you've avoided, the recognition you've quietly longed for, the truth you were finally ready to receive. It began with a whisper, a subtle shift in energy, a sense that something unspoken was moving toward you. And it ends here, with you standing fully in the light of your impact, your beauty, your power to transform. Even when you didn't realize you were doing it. You didn't ask for attention. You never needed applause. But life has decided it's time for you to see what others have long seen in you. That your presence is medicine. That your truth is magnetic. That your way of being, fluid, brilliant, deeply intuitive, is not a flaw to manage but a gift to honor. Someone had to speak it for you to believe it. And now that they have, the question becomes, will you live as if it's true? You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove. You only have to allow. Allow this mirror to remain close. Allow your heart to soften. Allow your inner world to finally reflect what your outer world is beginning to say back to you. You matter. You always have. And now I gently ask, has someone ever said something about you, behind closed doors or directly to your heart, that changed how you saw yourself? If so, share in the comments. Let your story ripple outward. It may be the mirror someone else is praying to find. And if this message held you, healed you, or helped you remember something forgotten, don't drift away quietly. Like, share, subscribe. Stay, because you are no longer a secret the universe is willing to keep.